Hey, what's up? Today we're going to be talking about how to get the most out of Keyscape. Keyscape is one of the greatest plugins on the market for all your needs for piano, Rhodes, Wurlitzer, CLAVINET, and beyond. It's my personal favorite. When you open up Keyscape, you're going to find that there are over 500 presets for sounds. However, to get the most out of these presets, you'll actually want to go in and customize some of these settings to your preference, your liking, and your playing style. In this video, we will focus on a few things that are going to really help bring your Keyscape use to the next level. We're going to be talking about velocity curves, dynamics, and then of course, fine sound adjustments. So let's get into it. First up, piano. We're just going to load up the custom C7 grand piano here. This is a great piano. Now, the very first thing that you're going to want to do is go into settings, and you're going to uncheck this box right here for the lock, because this locks you into whatever sort of velocity curve you have going on here, and different presets may call for different velocity curves. So yeah, uncheck this unless you want it to carry across all of your settings, which you actually may want in certain instances. But in this video, we're going to leave this unchecked. What you're going to want to do is click this drop-down menu here, and you're going to see that there are a bunch of different brands with their various models of keyboards. And this is very important because these are presets so that your keyboard has a great starting place with the velocity curves. I have here the Roland A88, which was actually used to design pretty much all of these presets in their initial phase. So I'm actually going to go down here and I'm going to select that Roland A88. Now, if you were using a different keyboard, for example, if you had a sequential Prophet 6, see, that's going to change the way that the velocity behaves. Same with if you had like a Native Instruments NI control. So as you can see, the curves are quite different. So I'm going to go back down here. I'm going to select my keyboard. If your keyboard is not in this menu, do not fear, because a lot of the things we're going to be talking about can be done just from the default. So as you can see for the Roland A88, this is a pretty standard just XY linear curve. Let's listen to what that sounds like. To me, it feels really nice. However, if I wanted to make it so that when I played that same passage, it felt like a lighter action, meaning that the velocities are going to be higher, it's going to be perceptibly louder, then I'm going to push this up right here, and you can adjust on the curve where you want the exact position to be. But I'm just going to go right here and now. Now, say I wanted a piano that had a harder action or that was darker. I'm going to pull it down. So obviously, if you want a really nice, mellow vibe, you could mess with pulling it down. We're not going to talk too much about these two sliders here, but these can adjust your lower limits and your upper limits and stretch the curve out in an interesting way. So whatever keyboard you have, it doesn't matter, but you want to take this node and experiment with different positions to get that exact feel. If you're a cat who likes to play with a lighter touch, then you're going to want to increase the velocity. Now, if you're somebody who digs in and you don't want those harsher velocities, then you'll want to pull this down like that. And subtle corrections can make a huge difference in the way that you feel the instrument. So what I've done over time is I've actually gone into the user area and I've saved some presets so I have good starting points. For example, you'll see in the user area over here, I have a medium action version, and that's just the standard curve, but you'll see I've slightly nudged that node up a bit just to give it a little bit more oomph. Now I have one for light action, and as you'll see, now that note has been pushed even further. It sounds almost like a brighter piano, even though I basically was playing with the same touch. Very important, because on certain tracks, you may want to have a piano that's much brighter and more aggressive. And then on certain tracks, or when you're playing live, you may want to have that pulled back so that it's a much more soft, elegant touch. If you'd like to take a more in-depth look at the specifics of the velocity curve and its two sliders, I highly recommend reading about it in the Keyscape manual that's available on the web. It's very well written about and proves just how valuable this sophisticated velocity curve diagram can be in practical use. But you can also just experiment around with the curve in the plugin and learn intuitively how it works, and how it can create the best feel for the Keyscape instruments with your particular MIDI keyboard. But this is not the end of the story with how to get the most out of the dynamics with these instruments. The next thing we're going to go to is a dial that's on the main page. On the far right over here, we have this dial called velocity sensitivity, or dynamics on other patches. Now, this is a very interesting dial because it's actually correlated to the velocity curve in the sense that this controls the actual loudness of everything you're playing. If I pull this all the way to the left, meaning no velocity sensitivity, check this out. I'm going to play something that's loud and quiet, but it's actually going to be sort of compressed in all the same volume. I'm going to increase velocity sensitive all the way to the top. What this means now is that when I play a note loud, it's loud, but if I play it really soft, there's actually a huge volume difference. I'm gonna do that same thing now, but with this velocity sensitive all the way down. So I'm playing as quiet as I can right now. So this gives rise to an important question, like why would you want to compress the velocities and the dynamics of your playing? Well, when you start messing with this dial and the velocity curve, you'll see that you actually don't want it to be either far left or far right, but somewhere in the middle. And settings around here in this area end up being very musical because you actually don't want your velocities to be jumping all over the place. Because even on a real piano, if you were to play a note as quietly as possible, yes, the dynamics or perceived loudness will be a little bit dipped, but you're still going to hear the note. There's no wrong or right way to use the velocity sensitivity or the dynamics dial, but just be very aware of what it does, as in the example I just showed you, so that you can use this to create the most musical presets for your specific way of playing. So as I said, in this area around here, this is generally where I hang out, but it can vary. So if I have it too far up, you're going to see it's jumping around too much. And if I have it all the way down, you'll see it's just, there's not enough dynamic variation. Now if I pull it into the center or a little left of center maybe. That feels very realistic to me, almost like a real piano. So the velocity curve and the dynamics dial, or velocity sensitive dial, these apply to pretty much every single Keyscape instrument. So knowing that, it's important to be able to adjust those on the fly when you're creating your own presets, and especially when you're making your own saved presets for future use. Let's check out the classical piano setting. You'll see that it already sounds a bit different than the stock C7 default grand piano. You also see on these various presets different things to tweak. For example, we have character. Right now it's on dark. Let's change it to hard. So already we're getting so many different tones. Warm, stage, really cool to be able to dial in some very minute details with the character buttons. Also this color shift, you'll see that if we start tweaking it to the right, we we start getting a brighter sound. And if we bring it all the way down, we get a much darker sound. So this color shift dial is also super useful for dialing in how much brightness and darkness you want on an instrument. So let's come over here and check out the release noise. The release noise are those release samples of the endings of notes and the general noise of the piano. So let's max that out and listen. You're going to hear a lot of the noise, and that is great because it's a lot of realism for the piano. But obviously, we don't want to have that too high in our mix, otherwise it sounds unnatural. But if we completely take it out, it sounds good, but it almost sounds too good. So bringing in these release samples really gives it a wonderful realism. And this dial also is super great on the Rhodes and Wurlitzers. And you'll see how if you start tweaking it, it really will make the instrument come to life. So let me show you some presets that I've made with the classical piano that work for various situations. Here's my Bach piano. This is what I use for practicing classical music when I can't use the upright in the other room, or if I don't have access to a real piano. This is a really nice sound. And so on and so on. That's Bach's Fugue in C minor from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Let's check out some of the settings. I've gone into the velocity and I've moved that note up so it's a little bit higher. And with the A88, this gives me a nice dynamic range. And the velocity sensitivity is around here, around 1 o'clock. As I said, the more you increase this, the more dynamic range there is. So. And you'd think, oh, especially with classical music, you want to have full dynamic range. But the truth is that would sound very unnatural. So I'm hanging around 1 o'clock. And I've brought this color shift down quite a bit, and we're using the dark character. Let's look at the EQ. I've done some low cutting because oftentimes when you hear classical recordings, you're sitting in audience perspective, and from there you're going to be receiving less of those immediate low frequencies. So this low cut does help out with that. We've done some significant high boosting at around 18K, which is the top of the range. No compression, just a little bit of tape saturation, although the tape saturation is really not going to kick in until you play really hard. This is just kind of gives it a nice vibe. And we've got gentle on the attack. And that's really it. The most important thing about this patch, obviously, are the settings of the velocity curve and with the dynamics. So whatever keyboard you have, you're going to want to mess with these settings. Now, for something like classical piano, you really do kind of need a weighted 88 key keyboard. If you try doing this with a 49, non-weighted keyboard, it's going to be hard to have the full dynamic range that you would with an 88 key keyboard. That's just the truth of it. But you still can dial it in so that your smaller MIDI keyboard works better for your playing style to make it feel more realistic and sound better. Let's look at another preset. This is another type of classical piano, playing Beethoven's Schwarzschild Sonata. And let's check it out. The settings, pretty similar to the last one. I think the main difference actually is the amount of reverb, and there's more velocity sensitivity. This one just gives more dynamic range, and for playing Beethoven, that is very dynamic music, I wanted a little bit more of that velocity sensitivity. Let's listen to this Keith piano. This is modeled off of the piano sound from Keith Jarrett's record, Standard Still Live, one of my favorite records of all time. It's the record that got me into Keith Jarrett. But for this demonstration, we're going to listen to a recording that I made a while ago of me playing the intro to My Funny Valentine note for note. So check it out. So if you know this record, you'll see that this is pretty similar. Obviously, it's never going to be exactly the same, but this certainly gets you into that vibe. Let's check out these settings just a little bit. So I've increased that node in the velocity curve actually higher than the previous ones. And the dynamics are actually less. And that's probably due to the fact that on that original recording by Keith Jarrett, there is a nice amount of compression going on, and it's a close mic recording. There's a classical vibe to it, but it's kind of a nice mix between a great jazz recording and a classic concert hall classical piano. And the character is warm, not dark. A little bit lower on the color shift. Nice amount of reverb. We all know that Keith Jarrett records have lots of reverb, and some people love it, some people hate it. And we have a natural feel. These are pretty subtle here. You'll have to mess with them to kind of know exactly how they affect your style of playing. So that's it for these classical piano settings. If you go into the factory, you'll see that there's so many different presets, and these are all so great. We got our rock settings. We got our cinematic. And these are great starting places. And with just a little bit of tweaking, you can really customize these so that they feel right to you. And then save them just by going up to Utility. You can just say Save Patch As and just type in a name, and then it'll show up in your user area over here. So there you're immediately ready to be playing an instrument that feels good and that's customized to your playing. As you can see over here, I have a bunch of presets, and I'm always adding to them. And I find that I like having different versions of them. Like for instance, you'll see this vintage vibe electric piano, and version 2 they'll be just slightly different. And depending on the song I'm recording, or if I'm playing live, you know, I'll use the preset that feels the best for that particular song, composition, or piece. Okay, let's talk about Rhodes. Rhodes is one of my favorite keyboard instruments of all time. I feel like it comes right after the piano for me in terms of the keyboard I love the most. And I have a couple here in the studio, a vintage vibe over here, and I also have a Fender Rhodes from 1973. All amazing instruments, and they all sound very different. Now, while a lot of these Keyscape presets are great for Rhodes, none of them kind of do what I want a Rhodes to do. And you'll be surprised to hear that for the most vintage sounding vibe of a Rhodes, I actually use the Vintage Vibe EP. Now, there's a few things that make early Rhodes sound great to me, and I'm namely talking about the Rhodes that Herbie Hancock used on records like Headhunters and Thrust. To me, that's the holy grail of Fender Rhodes sound. So let's try to get into that zone. I'm going to turn this treble all the way down, okay? And I'm gonna turn my mids all the way up, because this is gonna simulate that 70s sound. I'm turning the bass up just a little bit. Let's listen to it the other way. That sounds cool, but I prefer it to be dark and gritty. So I'm actually gonna back those mids off just a little bit. Now I'm also gonna check out this color shift knob. You'll see as I go to the right, we get that bell sound. And if we darken it up, by going to the left, it's obviously too dark. I'm gonna put it just a little left of center. So let's turn this treble all the way down. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to settings, and I'm gonna increase my velocity so that I get more of a bark when I play. So as you can hear, we're getting a little bit too much distortion or saturation in the sound, and that's due to the tape over here. So one thing that we can do is let's just turn it off. Crisis averted. Now, the thing is, I do like having a bit of tape saturation, so I'm gonna turn it back on. First thing I can do is press pad, and that's gonna bring the whole level down when it hits the tape. I'm also gonna bring the threshold down. And here's another tip. You can hit the tape harder by turning up your direct volume. So if I max it out, that's obviously way too much, but this actually allows for a much more controlled way of hitting the saturation. So what I like to do is I just hit a chord hard and increase my amount of direct signal until I get what I want, and that sounds pretty good. Okay. Of course, auto pan. Such great bark out of the left hand. So as you can see in this real-time demonstration, by messing with these settings of the velocity curve, your dynamics on the main page, and your EQ, there's so many things that are going to really contribute to getting the greatest sound out of the instrument. Also on Keyscape are great effects. For example, we have vibrato here. Get that super lazy sound. Got some echo. One thing that you could do is you could map this, for example, to your expression pedal. Simple as that. You know me, I love a glitch. All these dials in Keyscape you can map to any MIDI controller or MIDI device, so you can get really creative with it. Let's talk Wurlitzers. Obviously, everybody loves the 200A. Masterfully sampled, but let me tell you, the 140B, this has a really sweet tone to it. Yeah. Got the amp version. So I highly recommend checking out the 140B. And don't forget to go into those settings and start messing around with these velocity curves, the dynamics, and the tone to really get the most out of this instrument. Let's talk clavinets. This default clavinet C. So you can really tweak this thing out to sound however you want. Here is my preset for a kind of guitarish lead sound. I love this preset, and I love it in those situations where I need to have something that sounds kind of like an electric guitar. And of course, you can use your pitch bend wheel to simulate that old school whammy bar for the clavinet. This one's actually pretty easy to make. You can just go to that default clavinet C and we are going to put it on A for the pickups, and we're going to go over to the amp, and we're going to go to overdrive. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's put on some spring reverb. It's a bit much. Now all that's missing is the auto wah, so we'll turn on the crybaby. That sensitivity here on the wah is what's causing the auto wah. Now, if we want to turn that all the way down, we won't get that. But what we can do is we can have our expression pedal behave as a wah-wah pedal by clicking MIDI CC Learn, and boom, now we've got a wah-wah pedal. So much fun, so many things to customize and make your own. Keyscape is a masterfully designed library that took many, many years for the creators to make. I hope from this video that you can see that despite the fact that there are over 500 presets, you can take it even a step further to really make these instruments your own. I haven't released a library for Keyscape because I feel that a lot of these settings are very user specific, so depending on what kind of keyboard you have and your playing style. However, if you would like to see some of these presets in a library, just put it in the comments below and I will definitely consider releasing some of my presets in a library. But in the meantime, I encourage you to open up Keyscape and get into those velocity curve settings, your dynamics, and all those tone controls, and save your own presets and really get them to be exactly how you want them to be. Thanks for watching. See you next time.